The Southern Alberta Council on Public Affairs acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains, and we pay respect to the Blackfoot people, past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. We offer respect to the Métis and all who have lived on this land and made Lethbridge their home.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Shelby Zubak, and it is my pleasure to be your moderator today. We're thrilled to celebrate SACA's 58th year as an independent, volunteer-led forum where thoughtful dialogue on local, provincial, national, and international issues come to life every Thursday at noon from September until June. I'm very proud of that rhyme. Before we begin, just a quick few reminders. I do ask that you please silence or turn off your phones just for respect of the conversation. And also out of respect for our speaker and your fellow attendees, just please remain quiet during the presentation and reserve comments or questions for the end. You may have seen as well our land acknowledgement displayed on the screen prior to the start. Just a quick comment, the SACPA is committed to encouraging meaningful dialogue and positive change in our communities, and that reconciliation is paramount to that. So just a quick review of today's format. We'll begin now with our guest speaker. At around 12:30, we'll open the floor for questions and discussions, and we'll try to wrap up promptly at 1 p.m. with a few final notes and a preview of next week's session. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's presentation. When traditional hearing aids no longer provide sufficient benefit, what can be done? The world of implantable hearing devices, cochlear implants, will be explored today. How these technologies work, how they've been able to prevent lifelong deafness in children born without hearing, which adults might be a candidate, and what life is like as a cochlear implant user will be detailed. Drawing on clinical experience and fellowship training in cochlear implants, Dr. Glenn Hole will demystify the process of assessment, referral, and post-implant care. Dr. Glenn is a published researcher interested in psychoacoustics, hearing aid technology, tinnitus, and hyperacusis. He holds a Doctor of Audiology degree from Salus University in Pennsylvania, a Bachelor of Science Degree in Audiology from Bristol University in the UK, and an Advanced Studies certification in tinnitus and hyperacusis, as well as a Master's of Science degree in Clinical Audiology from Salus University. Quite the experience. Outside of work, Glenn enjoys fitness, music, hiking, camping, and of course, spending time with his wife and 3 young children. Please join me now in welcoming Dr. Glenn Hole.
Thank you, Shelby. Thank you for having me back. It was about a year and a half ago I came and talked about hearing loss and the relationship with cognitive decline and dementia. So I thank you all for being here, ready to listen to my next topic. I just want to foreground as well and say I've had a little bit of a frog in my throat for the past few weeks, working with the doctor on it, so if I do sound a bit croaky, I have to clear my throat. Please forgive me for that. So let's just begin. Cochlear implants. I have already bumped into several of you here that are actually wearing them. I can see you in the audience. I may have spoken to you about them before, personally. But I want to take those of you who've not experienced cochlear implantation, or those that might have been told you might need one, on a little bit of an exploration of the journey through science, the technology, and the meaning and of what that achieves for people when their hearing becomes so poor that I can't help them any other way, okay? And that's really important to remember. This is not about replacing what you already do and that is working for you. This is when we really don't have an option to help you. And hearing aids and cochlear implants and hearing assistive devices, they restore more than just sound. It's about the human connection that it becomes lacking as hearing loss takes away our interactions with each other. So the agenda here, hearing and hearing loss. We've got to know what a cochlea is before we implant it. So we're going to teach you that, so you can all be surgeons. Just kidding, don't do it. How they work, who might need them, outcomes that you might see with a cochlear implant, and what the future looks like for people with implantation, and what other technologies might be coming down the pipeline as well. We'll see if we can get to that part. So what is a cochlea? Does anyone know how big the cochlea is and what it does? About that big, about the size of a pea-ish. Tiny, tiny little thing. The cochlea is a pea-sized organ through which everything we've ever heard is turned into sound that our brain can understand. It is located in what we call the temporal bone, so that's the side of your head. It's one of the bones that is kind of not attached when you're a baby, and it fuses and it becomes attached with the rest of the bone plates in the skull. It's the hardest bone in the body, the temporal bone, and it's because it contains one of the most delicate organs that we have. The cochlea is, let me see if my pointer's gonna work for me. Kind of isn't, kind of is. Here we go. The cochlea is here. It's this snail shell shaped organ, okay? And it's filled with fluid, and it's attached to the cochlear nerve. This is a really cool experimentation and research project that was done. What the researchers did is that they found a way to dissolve the bone, and now what you're looking at is just the nerve bundle, and the green area is the cells, the actual hair cells that pick up sound and turn them into vibration, send them down this nerve. So once we're hearing through the cochlea, once those vibrations enter the cochlea through the eardrum, through the tiny bones in the ear, they travel through a complex pathway of nerves from the ear to the brain. Ultimately, the brain contains a copy of sound. It's a keyboard of sound that copies what the vibrations should sound like in the cochlea. It's what we call this tonal organization of the brain. If we were to look and we play a certain sound in the brain, in the cochlea, that certain sound lights up a certain set of areas of the cochlea and the auditory system. I think someone's phone is making a bit of a noise, so don't worry too much. If they'll call you back. The cells in the cochlea are really, really cool. They're almost like little muscle cells. If you push a hair cell in the ear, it contracts. It has a contraction to it. It has movement. It can make itself longer or shorter. And so when we're talking about how cells in the ear work, what they actually do is they refine the sound. They don't just hear it, but they can actually tense up around sounds to make them more specific. As we lose hearing over time, and I don't really think this is incorrect to say, almost everybody over the age of 30 has some type of hearing loss. It might be not enough to get in the way of hearing everyday sounds, but it's happening to us all. So, and by the age of 70 or 75, half of people have a hearing loss that would need attention from an audiologist, ideally. But one of the reasons, who here wears a hearing aid? Is anybody willing to show up with that? Yeah. It's okay if you're sitting there and you're like, I don't want to tell anybody I'm wearing a hearing aid, that's fine too. But sometimes when you have a hearing aid, you can't hear as clearly as you think you should. Sometimes it sounds messy. And one of the reasons is that as we lose hearing, we not only lose the ability to hear quiet sound, but we lose that ability to finely tune those vibrations. And we can't be as specific for each tone that we hear as we lose hearing. So when somebody comes to me and they're looking for a hearing device, for example, I have to tell them I can't make it perfect like it used to be. So please don't come to my clinic thinking I can make it perfect. I'll do the best job we can, but this is one of the reasons why with hearing loss, eventually we get to the point that we can't fix it all. As was stated, I don't know the lady's name, but thank you for your explanation. The cochlea itself has a nerve bundle in the middle, and those nerves eventually disconnect themselves from broken parts of the cell that aren't working. So we can see that, you can see this absent part of the nerve here. There's all these fibers, and then this kind of withdraws. And essentially, in somebody that's going through hearing loss, eventually getting to the point where a cochlear implant might be what they need, the nerve has started to move away from what are essentially non-functioning cells. Essentially, deafness. You know, historically, people have just been called deaf. And that's a label that some people want to have, some people don't. But that's why we get to the point now, we don't have to have a society where people have to endure deafness fully. Not everybody does. And that brings us to cochlear implants. These have been developed as of sort of like the 1960s onwards, where it was discovered that if we just put electricity, it's kind of brutal, but if we electrocute someone's hearing nerve, they either jump out of the chair, and if you turn it down a little bit, they start to say, well, that's like a sound. And so eventually, they figured out that we could bypass the damaged parts of the ear, and we can directly stimulate the auditory nerve. And it's not like a hearing aid, because it doesn't make any sound. You see, what we're doing is we're not able to use sound. But what if we just electrocute that nerve? And we get pretty good at doing that very specifically. What if we just send it small enough current to make that nerve hear something? So this is where we get to today, cochlear implants, modern devices. They're implanted partially, and part of it is on the outside. On the back of the head, there's usually a magnet that attaches to sort of an internally implanted receiver coil that sends that electrical impulse down into the cochlea. Now, how do we get it in there? How do we get an electrode into the cochlea? Well, it's not my job, thankfully. It's the job of a very steady-handed surgeon under the guidance of very sophisticated equipment. They will be monitoring all kinds of things to make sure this works properly. But essentially, on the back of your head, they would drill through the mastoid bone down to the cochlea and thread a tiny electrode, can you believe that, into this pea-sized organ. This organ that has been the way that you've heard everything you've ever heard in your life. It's so small, we're now going to thread something into it because you can't use it anymore. So the job is to get it as deeply as you can, to get it around that snail shell, up to the top if you can. Now this is a X-ray of a child. We know it's a child because they got two. Adults are not normally implanted on both sides, but this will be a child being implanted with two. It's important because for a child, we're teaching them how to speak from a younger age. As an adult, you will have, if you've lost hearing, you will have done that later on in life, and you probably have had the opportunity to learn language, spoken language at least. So this child, you can see how it's implanted under the skin against the skull. There's a wire that has, I don't know if we've got an earthquake here or something, but a wire that leads down into the cochlea, and that other little wire up here is just the ground electrode. For those of you who are electricians, you need to ground this thing or to have another electrode somewhere else. And there it is in place. So the closer you get into the center to the nerve, the better. Here's some really close-up imagery of what's sitting inside the cochlea. We have these tiny little points, these electrodes here. And these electrodes are acting like the cells that are lost. And what I've done here, kind of crudely, is to show you how the cochlear implant could put a little bit of a current out between two of these, or maybe across several of them, to create different tones, different types of sound, or combinations of sound for the listener. So it's not like we can recreate the cells in the ear. We can stimulate the nerve in certain areas, but just wanted to show you how small these things are and how you can kind of make, if you've got 2 points, you can make one a little stronger than the other, and you can kind of do lots of different little different spots in between each point, and you can kind of target individual cell groups. But it doesn't restore normal hearing, right? I can't do that with a hearing aid. I can't do that with a cochlear implant. I don't think it can be done. I don't think it will ever be done to restore normal hearing. But that doesn't mean that a cochlear implant is any less life-changing for candidates. It doesn't mean that those that get a cochlear implant are worse off now than they would have been otherwise. These candidates have no other option but to improve their hearing to this degree, okay? So for those of you who are wearing hearing aids and wondering, maybe I should get a cochlear implant instead, the answer for that will almost certainly be probably not. If you can hear at all with your hearing aids, it's very likely that a hearing aid is the better option. If you cannot even function with your hearing aid, then you need to come and see somebody that could evaluate you for candidacy, okay? And I understand that could have changed for certain people over time. Not everybody starts off not doing well. But in the cochlea, we have 15,000 cells to hear with. In a cochlear implant, we have 22 electrodes to hear with, okay? So that's why we're not getting the same fidelity. You might be able to get up to 220 different combinations that give you 220 different distinct pitches with a cochlear implant. But it's kind of like going down from a 4K television back to a cathode ray tube television in some ways. But comparing that to nothing at all, I'll take a cathode ray TV all day long. If I can see what's happening and I can participate and understand. Now, you can't always use all of the electrodes that you put in, so even if they put in more and more and more electrodes, don't be sold on that. You can only use probably about 8 of them in total. So, who needs it? Who could be a candidate? We've talked about this a bit. It's all about balancing your needs, and sometimes the cost and the benefit to that patient, and even in the public healthcare service. We can't give cochlear implants to everybody that might potentially need them. There's a lot of factors to it, and the timings are important. So this is an audiogram. If you've been to a clinic where we're doing hearing tests, you can come to mine. Other clinics are available, I'm obligated to say. But this is how we describe hearing to people. So if you have a hearing loss, typically it means that your ability to hear sound on this axis has gone below 25 decibels. So this right across here. And these are all the pitches involved in human speech. So you can see in this example, this person's hearing starts off normal, becomes worse into the high pitches. But this would be a candidate for a hearing aid. This would be a typical candidate for a cochlear implant, where the person cannot hear sound until it gets to 60 decibels. That's like somebody hammering on a piano. They would just be able to start hearing that. And then it goes down from there to the point that they wouldn't be able to even perceive a jet engine. That's the type of person that would benefit from a cochlear implant. And usually if we put a hearing aid in those people's ears, we can maybe bring them up to the point they can perceive some sound, but they won't be able to understand any of it. They won't be able to make any sense of it, and you're still essentially just hearing loud sound while still feeling very isolated. And that is a key point. You've got to move on at that point towards implantation. The criteria for selection, children can be implanted at above 12 months old. And so at that age, if you've already figured out the child can't hear, and you want that child to develop spoken language, cochlear implantation is the current only option available. The other option, of course, is if you can put a hearing aid on them, fine, do that. It's not preferable to implant anybody, but usually we need to give them enough time to develop speech and language. If you are older, there's really no age limit on it. There might be limitations on other things, for example, like general health, whether or not there's a nerve there to actually give signals to. There's a bunch of contraindications to not doing it. There are some adults with some of these quite attractive looking devices that you can just attach it straight to the back without anything around your ear or any wires. And again, I'm moving a little quicker here, but basically if you're not doing well with your hearing aids, in Alberta, they will implant adults one side only, provided they've tried hearing aids and are not benefiting from them. They will go a little off-label sometimes for people that are borderline. So it's very important to explore those possibilities. It's done by a team. It's not just one person that says, here it is, take it. It's done by a team, and there's a group of, in Calgary, a group of surgeons, psychologists. This is a big deal. People have to adapt to a lot. Occupational therapists, psychiatrists, audiologists like myself, radiologists, lots of ists, okay? Lots of professionals in the healthcare service need to be involved, otherwise it'll just be, it's not gonna work. You've got to have rehabilitation with this. Some complications can occur with any surgery. This is typically a 3-hour or less surgery, a day surgery. You'd go in the morning, you'd be discharged in the evening. It would take about a month for you to get that turned on, for it to settle in and turn on. Your complication rate is about 1 in 10,000 procedures for a more serious complication, like a device failing or somebody getting an infection. But that is far outweighed by the benefits to the greater number of people. And obviously, ask the right questions of the surgeon that's doing this. There's a great degree of listening training to get that brain hearing those sounds. You know, like I showed you the sound clips, it's a bit strange at first. It doesn't sound normal. But if that's what your brain's learning, it can use it. And of course, for children, these are children that would never hear. We put them on track and get them used to it and get them hearing and integrated into school. So for adults, across the whole spectrum of adults that get hearing aids, if we look at the biggest research studies, we can see on average a 44% improvement in their ability to understand speech. They come from 8 to about 50. Now, if you get about 50 to 60% of words correct, you can usually understand 80 to 90% of sentences. Okay, so if I just say the word to you, boat, that's meaningless, right? But you might get it wrong. You might thought I said moat. But what if I say, we're going to take the boat down the river? You can immediately tell I'm not talking about anything else. And so if you can get 53%, you're pretty much doing as normal as you can. The earlier you go with the child, and there might be some questions about this, why are we implanting children? The earlier you go, the more brain development there is. And we can see, and this is a forest plot, and I know I'm running a little short on time here, so I won't spend too much time. But if your scores for children in orange here are a little higher, these are the ones that were implanted before 18 months of age. And this is for their academic outcomes. This is compared to children implanted after 18 months of age. So more to the right of that chart is lower score, more this way is higher scoring. And then children that never got cochlear implants but that were candidates here. So we can see the further you are towards me, the better. That was the children that were implanted earlier. And also, we're seeing improvements in quality of life for those children too. Not just they're doing well in school, but they're miserable. They're doing well in school and they are happier. And they've scored higher on these measures. Quick case study, 24-year-old female. In that category where life was just impossible for them to hold down a job, sentence recognition was lower than 30%. That's not words. Their words were probably at 5. They're getting 30% sentences. The cochlear implant team decided that this was possible. The patient decided that, and the family decided they wanted to do it. And so normal surgery might come with a little bit of nerve inflammation. after you've had it. The facial nerve needed a little bit of prednisone to calm it down after the surgery. Activation was done. The patient was tested. Before they had the hearing aid, they had severe to profound hearing loss. With the hearing aid, they had only a mild to normal hearing profile. Okay, so they could detect tones. Initially, their ability to understand speech improved by 76%. That was at 2 months. At 10 months, it improved to 100% speech recognition for sentences. The patient was able to move into their own apartment, get a job, participate in the things that they wanted to. And so there are success stories like this. There's also some points at which cochlear implants don't work. We know that that was at about 1 in 10,000 people, that it's unfortunately not going to work as well as in this patient's case. But the ability to improve self-esteem, confidence, and to reduce the risk of ongoing cognitive decline, because that's what a consequence of untreated hearing loss can be as well, was all mitigated for this patient. Now, one final point, and then I'll move on to questions. I think we're right on time. Some people, and I don't know if there's anyone here that's part of the deaf community, somebody who actually chooses visual forms of communication, signing, reading, that kind of thing, lip reading. Some people don't want to get implanted, some people, and that's fine. No one's forcing implants on anybody. There is some controversy in some groups that cochlear implantation may take away members of the deaf community, that the deaf societies and culture may be erased over time by technology that lets people hear again. It's an interesting question. Should children be implanted before they got the choice? The problem is that if you wait until a child could choose, the period for brain development that would allow them to develop normal speech would be missed. So we put that on the parents to decide for their children. So an interesting ethical debate can be found on just about any topic, and there is certainly one in cochlear implantation. But anyway, that is my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for participating. And I think we're just going to leave it with Shelby now to tell you what happens next.
Okay, let's move into our Q&A portion. We already have a question at the side here, but if you would like to ask a question, we ask that you please do line up against the wall near the microphone here. Start by stating your name and keep your question brief and to the point. No long stories or preludes, please. Maybe you can catch people afterwards. That's just in the interest of time and equity for everybody participating. Also, if you'd prefer not to speak, you can feel free to write your question down and make sure it's legible and signed. And classroom style it up just to the front here, and I'll read it on your behalf. But without further ado, Bev, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Bev Mundell-Atherstone. Thank you very much. I learned quite a bit. When our older daughter was born, Stephanie, she was born with a moderate to profound hearing loss. And she had hearing aids from the time she was a young child. But as she got into her middle age, her hearing deteriorated, and she went in for a cochlear transplant because she was not able to hear. They operated on the worst ear. They usually only do one ear at a time. And she had the operation and came out of the operation, could not hear, and it's been years now, and it was a failed operation. She cannot hear. She went in because two of her husband and best friend both had cochlear implants, and both can hear very well now at the same, with the same operation. So that was just to let you know that has happened. I have two questions. One is, does the Alberta healthcare system pay fully for the cochlear implant? And Two, you described so nicely for us about the cochlea itself and how the stimulation occurs from the electrodes. But I'm assuming the stimulation of the nerves in the cochlea then goes to the brain, and that is played out on that keyboard that you said is in the brain. You mentioned there are only 22, I think, electrodes. When cochlear implants first came out, we were told that they only could stimulate a very few of the nerves. I'm wondering if that means there were fewer electrodes at that time, because people had a much narrower field of hearing than they do now with cochlear implants. Could you comment? Thank you.
Thank you. That's obviously really, really cool questions, and so difficult to hear that sometimes the reality is that it doesn't work sometimes, and that there's failures for some people. Some people aren't able to obtain the goal, and that's always a very, very difficult situation. And so that's tough, and I'm really, really sorry to hear that that was the case. Alberta Health Services does pay fully for cochlear implantation for everybody if they need one, if they're a candidate. The difficulty can be getting to the point of candidacy when you might already be a candidate for quite a while, and getting that recognized, and getting them having enough funding, enough implants, and enough surgical time to do it. So the other question that you had was about numbers of electrodes, and how are we getting the brain to hear as much information as possible? So what I'll do is I'll just go back to a slide just to kind of answer that question very briefly. And so when it comes to cochlear implantation, we are aware that we can only make probably a maximum of 220 individual pitches by combining different electrodes together. But the fewer electrodes we have, the fewer individual pitches we could use. Sometimes it's not a question of just like this two, this two, this two. It's about banks of them being used together, and a series of electrodes happening all at the same time, all at different rates. So it's almost like this device is turned on all the time and firing a little bit all the time, and we're just adjusting it. And so there's lots of different tricks and techniques and electronic wizardry that goes on that's sort of beyond the scope of non-electronic medical engineers to really explain. I certainly won't attempt it. But it's certainly fewer than 3,500 distinct tones. It's going to be more in the order of 100 to 200. And we can't take advantage of all the channels. Just a final point. The number of channels, the number of electrodes in a cochlear implant did start off with 2. It was one or the other, and we were just hearing basic sound. We're now up to the point of 22, and we can kind of recreate sound to the degree that I was showing you. That's the best we can do. But you're stuck with the number of electrodes that were originally put in, okay? The processor on the back is what can be changed. So, yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Hello, I am Katie Aurora, and I have been a longtime fan of science fiction. And in science fiction, one of the things that you often see is using implants not just to restore lost functionality, but to enhance or add new functionality. Now, your presentation was pretty clear that with current technology, that's not really how it works. But I am curious, is there any like research being done, technology being developed that might get us to more of that sci-fi version of an implant?
So yeah, the holy grail of restoring something like that 3,500 individual hearing points that we're born with. The only avenue that I have seen that might be able to get us there one day is looking at the genetic possibilities and restoring or regrowing hair cells that will interface with the nerve. This has not been successful so far in humans. We know that certain species of birds spontaneously can restore their own hearing if it's lost. They can regrow their hair cells. I mean, we can regrow cells all the time in our own bodies. We do it. We're not the same person we were 5 years ago. Every cell in our body has been changed, but some of the cells can't. And one of the problems with turning on genes to restore cells that disappeared is that there's another thing that turns on genes randomly, and that's cancer. So one of the biggest challenges that we have is with these gene therapies for hearing is in animal models that we can't just trigger the one gene very easily. We end up creating a bit of a mess, and so we don't really feel like that's ready, I think, for prime-time human beings. So maybe one day, you know, was it Geordie LaForge with his eyes, his visor? I think it would be very cool if we could restore vision and hearing fully. I'll be frontline doing it if we can.
Maria Fitzpatrick, thank you for a really informative presentation. But my question isn't about cochlear implants. I wear 2 hearing aids, and if there's 2 people talking in a room, I can't hear either one of them. If there's one and there's no white noise, I can hear. Are there changes in terms of hearing aids that can define the white noise out and human voice sound or whatever you're listening to make that better? And I've worn these for 27 years. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go back to another slide. Let's see where it is. So hearing loss. I think I had a slide here somewhere about it. They're all about hearing loss. So let's look at this. If you lose hearing, it's not a binary loss. What I mean by binary is you lose one thing, we can just put it straight back. The hearing loss itself, the actual membrane of cells is thinned out and more difficult to stimulate, and it's more difficult for the sound to go in there and just vibrate it specifically. So we can't, with any hearing aid, if somebody tells you, we can restore natural hearing or hear better in background noise all the time, everywhere, that's not good, honest marketing of your services or your product. Hearing aids are better than ever, and they always will be. You buy a hearing aid today, and 5 years later, it's going to be obsolete. This is really not true either. But we can reduce more and more background noise with hearing aids each year. We can prove it on paper. Does it overcome this? Sometimes, to a degree. The point would be, I suppose, if whenever you're looking at a hearing aid for anybody in any clinic, test it. Figure out what the limitations are and ask hard questions of your clinician. We should be held to account for claims that are being made by the hearing care industry. People who build these hearing aids make a lot of claims. And so I would say also only about 1/3 to 1/4 of hearing aids have ever been fitted correctly according to best practices out there in the real world. So we need to make sure that the clinician that you're working with has done everything, and then we can ask that question is, how are my hearing aids going to work for me properly or not? Because I don't think that question has been answered properly in a lot of people's cases. I know it hasn't been. But yeah.
Hello, my name is Knut Petersen. And I neglected to ask Glenn to stand over there by the...
Oh, I'm hiding.
So I can kind of look him in the face when I ask my question. That's my fault. It's not Glenn's. My question relates to cost. What, if you are deemed to be a good candidate for this procedure, what would the cost be involved in that, and what's kind of the timeline and all those kind of things? One more thing I'd like to mention is, anybody like to remain Canadians? There's a table in the back that will help you out.
So I should say before I answer this question, I'm an audiologist that I'm not involved directly in providing, selling, or servicing cochlear implants for anybody. So I want to make that clear as well. When I talk about cost, I don't get paid anything for cochlear implants. I don't work with them. Only Alberta Health Services does. Now, they keep their pricing for what they pay for cochlear implants kind of under wraps. We don't, as members of the hearing care community, I don't know what a cochlear implant costs directly, but I believe that the total cost unofficially is probably in the realm of about $35,000 per patient for the full care, including the surgery, all the rehabilitation, the device. I know in the United States that where insurance companies are getting involved and the prices are higher, I know that the submissions are over $100,000 to $80,000 in some cases to the insurance providers. Okay, so I know that's and we know that's, depending on how we feel about that, it's probably inflated for sure by that entire system. So that's the costs, as far as I'm aware, to the provincial government. And the timeline would be, this is how it would work. You're not doing well, you come to a clinic, we test you, we do a candidacy evaluation in the clinic. That takes about an hour. We have to make sure that if you go to go see the people in Calgary that do the implant evaluation, that what you're wearing on your ears is appropriate. What if I sent you there and your hearing aids weren't even set right? You fail the test, you get an implant, it's a disaster. So you have to come, be fitted with appropriate level hearing aids to be tested properly so that we can tell if you can hear with those hearing aids or not. I think it takes about 6 months to get an evaluation from the time I would refer somebody in my clinic. And then I think it can be sooner than that based on need sometimes. Then I think the surgery is between 6 or 7 months after that. It's a quick surgery, so it doesn't take a lot of clinical time. And then within usually 6 months to a year, somebody is getting the most out of that device, provided they followed the advice, they've followed up with their appointments at the hospital. But this is all done out of the hospitals in Edmonton, and South Health Campus does the surgeries in Calgary, and then it's Richmond Road Audiology Clinic that does all of the switch on and the rehab. So.
Hi, my name is Tom McLeod, and I'm a frequent visitor here to this program, and you've seen me wandering around with the cochlear ear implant. So I apologize that I really don't have a question. I just wanted to say that it was an extremely good presentation, though, and my experience with the cochlear ear implant started way back in around 2000 when a series of hearing aids, well, start with, I've been deaf on the right side of my head since Lyndon Johnson was president, so it's a long time ago. and subsequent to that, I carried on and managed to function really well with just hearing on one side. But smart, you've got to position yourself on the right side of the room and the table and all various things like that. So, but anyway, finally in 2009, I was passed the bar and was accepted in the cochlear implant program in British Columbia, where I lived at that time. And British Columbia was only doing 25 cochlear implants per year. And I was the first one to get mine in 2009. Now, I'd been through a series of hearing aids that, but my hearing was just getting progressively worse and worse until I was getting them through the BC Hearing and Deaf Association, who have a big clinic in Vancouver, and so it wasn't a sales job by any means that I had these. It was a professional audiologist selling, doing the work, and they came to the point where they could not give me a hearing aid that helped, and I was down to the point where I could not talk on the telephone, and my wife and I could not carry a conversation 4 feet away over the kitchen table. And it was very, very frustrating for her and very, very frustrating for me. But fortunately, the job I had let me carry on because I managed a long-term disability plan, and the plan had a 2-year window for vocational rehabilitation after you were declared fit for work. On top of that, we were trying to convince the forest industry to, with an idea called early intervention, and secondly, trying to get them to accommodate disabled workers, which was like climbing Mount Everest without a rope. Anyway, they weren't too cooperative. So my situation as a manager of that plan was secure in the sense that I was a living example of a person who is disabled who is able to be accommodated. Anyway, in 2009, I finally got the cochlear ear implant, and through a simple process, they did a test to make sure I was deaf enough to qualify. Then after I passed that, they did what they call a water test, where they took me in, and the audiologist wanted to find out if you have vertigo after they drill a hole in your head to do the implant. So I went through that, and then the next step was meeting the surgeon in St. Paul's Hospital, did the implants, and following that, they had an appointment for me to come in and do have the day surgery. I got in early in the morning and left time in the early evening, woke up. Anyway, the next thing was I was there for 6 weeks, 100% deaf. And you know, one of the interesting things, I'd been warned about this, that you may hear some sounds from out of place, and sure enough, lo and behold, there was about 3 things that happened that I remember really well. One of them, while being deaf, was a voice, a beautiful baritone or tenor type voice, like a radio announcer. But he never ever did finish the sentence that he started, that I could hear crystal clear right out of the blue. That's where outer space comes in, I guess. And then there was some music that, I forget what you call it, but anyway, it's a kind I'm not very fond of, and it showed up there once in a while too. Anyway, 6 weeks went by, and I was fitted for a meeting with the audiologist, which took probably 4, maybe 5 hours. I was in a couple hours in the morning and about 3 hours in the afternoon, where you had to really concentrate on all these little low sounds so she could program the computer in this cochlear ear implant. And so the end result was that after that period of time, and we were in a small office, the audiologist, and of course my wife was there supervising the entire process, and they kept talking back and forth the whole time, and the end result was that she, all of a sudden, she hit one of the keys on her computer, and lo and behold, I could hear like I couldn't remember ever hearing before, crystal clear. The head audiologist, who was in the adjoining office, come tearing him into there. "Can you hear already?" And I said, "Yeah, as clear as a bell." we left there and went shopping, and I continually kept pinching myself to say, this has got to be a dream. It can't be true. It's got to end here sometime. But it didn't. We got on the ferry, went back up to the Sunshine Coast where we'd be living, and it was just at supper time. And so the cafeteria was full of people all talking, and lo and behold, her and I sat there at a table and talked without any problem. It was amazing. Now, when I got home, just out of curiosity, because I was told at that time, and remember, this is 2009, that it was costing the British Columbia Medical Services Plan $35,000. And so I thought it'd be interesting to see what it costs in the United States and their wonderful private services, you know. So I got on the computer and looked it up. And I didn't go to any specific place because I'm sure it varies across the different insurance plans. But as a general price that I was quoted from the computer was $150,000. So there you go. And mine cost me $0, of course, through the medical services plan. So I'm sorry I didn't have a question for you, but I added some. Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you for, and I know we did say no longer anecdotes, but I think that was worth every moment. So really helped us a lot. Thank you.
Okay, we do have one final question to wrap everything up. This is from an anonymous person. So the query is, can you help with tinnitus without hearing loss?
So the answer to that is yes, but we need to understand really what the underlying reason for the tinnitus is before we can target it. Tinnitus is the perception of sound, ringing, buzzing, hissing in the ear when there is no external source. So for those of you who are not sure what that is, tinnitus is usually associated with hearing loss. So the question is absolutely right. Sometimes it's not. Tinnitus can have a very strong psychological component where somebody can begin to perceive something that was kind of always there and starts to wonder why it's there, and then the brain starts to pass it to the fear, fight or flight part of the brain, and it becomes very, very obvious that it's always there now, very obvious to the consciousness. So sometimes what we have to do is to have people educate themselves or become more and more aware of that process where the brain can start to over-represent things that are not, that are kind of a normal experience. There's never truly silence and if any of you go into a room, close the doors, turn off everything, you will probably hear something rather than absolutely nothing at all, and that is tinnitus. Everybody will have some. So there's the psychological component and the psychological pathway to reducing the tinnitus, which can include even formalized therapies for some people. Cognitive behavioral type therapy is very important in the management of tinnitus with hearing loss and without. But education about it is really just, you can do a lot of self-help with this issue. There are some people that have tinnitus because they have some kind of disease process that is outside of the auditory pathway. That might need to be addressed as well. So it's just really important to get a full clinical workup from a doctor, maybe an ENT specialist. Come and see an audiologist who can check your hearing to make sure there's absolutely nothing wrong. Because sometimes there's something, even if it's small. Okay, there's something causing the tinnitus where it's not getting in the way of your hearing. That's a very, very common finding that we find in my clinic. And we have specific tools to look at the cells in your ear to see how many of them are still there. So you can hear quite well and lose quite a lot of cells. You'll get tinnitus as a result, even though you don't yet have a true treatable hearing loss. So if you've not checked it out, whoever Anonymous is, you're very welcome to come and get it checked out. It's free to get it checked.
Okay, thank you. I might be presumptive in assuming that that may be your final thought or take-home message, but do you have anything else that you would like to just leave people with as they go about on their afternoon?
Well, again, thank you very much for listening. And again, I suppose the biggest, most fun part of my job as an audiologist, as a doctor of audiology, is improving communication between people and enhancing the community that we have in Lethbridge, really between people that would otherwise have more distant relationships with each other, with their spouses, and maybe less confidence in themselves. So I'm just really, really excited to be part of that solution, and really, really excited to be able to talk to people about it and make people more aware about it. But even if you've got hearing aids, even if you've got a cochlear implant, it's just so important that you use them and that you get involved and that you try to stay as a participant rather than a bystander in the social life that you can have, because that's what keeps this part working. It's not just the hearing aid, it's not the sound, but it's the engagement and the participation that gets you feeling better, gets you feeling more energized. So live your social life. Hearing is a big part of that, and really proud to be part of it with you. So thank you.
Thank you again so much. Before we close today's session, just a quick comment about what we'll be talking about next week, which is the current state of childcare in Alberta. What a pertinent topic. Once again, a big thank you to those who make SACPA possible. Of course, the Lethbridge Senior Citizen Organization for generously providing this room for us free of charge. And a thanks to all of you that support their lunch counter. The University of Lethbridge for their ongoing partnership and support. The Lethbridge Herald and other media outlets for their coverage of SACPA. And of course, Rogers Community TV for recording these sessions. You can watch replays on Rogers TV or access them anytime at sacpa.ca or our YouTube channel. Let's just give one more round of applause for today's speaker. And thank you all again for spending your lunch hour with us. We hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.